Hurley, Pitino, the stage is set. You're locked on UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you just bet $5 and it wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right. The stage is set. Madison Square Garden. Rick Pitino, Hurley, and his Huskies. Doesn't get much better than this. We have two teams that both claim Madison Square Garden as their home. One actually plays home games there. One actually has it as a store south, where their fans descend upon New York City and essentially make themselves comfortable because we're typically there for a long period of time. We have a St. John's team coming in that's riding a 6-game win streak. Dan Hurley and the Huskies shook off a poor start against Xavier. And what's amazing about that first game for them is even with playing, and I would call that first half terrible. It's not the standard of what we've watched over the most of last year, year and a half, and then all of this year. But still leading by one at half is mind-blowing, and it's kind of incredible in a nutshell. Is I wasn't worried, but I was sitting here watching that game and just really not concerned, but perplexed at the start. But then I started to remember, history of old games of whoever the one seed is has to play that traditional 12 p.m. start. It's a noon game. You usually get a spotty crowd initially, right? Because people are taking the train in, especially if it's UConn. And it just was a typical 12 o'clock game for pretty much most tournaments, right? Whether it's a smaller tournament or a large one, noon is not a game where, it's a Wednesday. Not everyone can get off. It's not going to have the same electricity as tonight will. But they shook that off, ended up, eventually blowing Xavier out, which was kind of the theme of probably the entire second half of the Big East is kind of not starting slow, but just kind of a slow eventual march to the top where, a 4-point lead becomes 7 and then 7 becomes 12, 12 becomes 20 till we're all excited about Andrew Hurley coming in. I heard, I forget the Twitter handle that said this, but that Andrew Hurley is the human victory cigar. And I mean absolutely no disrespect to that. I think that's a wonderful thing because if he played on, and he has played on other iterations of this UConn team, would barely play all year, especially unless you're playing at the beginning of the year and you're playing some subpar teams. So he's gotten some more run this year than any other year he's been on the team. So that's always great to see. But let's get back to tonight's game. Hopefully we'll see a Andrew Hurley sighting tonight. I don't expect it, but it would be a nice surprise. You have a Hall of Fame coach in Rick Pitino. No matter what you think about him, personally, I have my thoughts. Won't get into that right now. He's facing off against the best coach in college basketball today and the absolute national coach of the year. End of story. Go debate with the wall. It's Dan Hurley. Don't overthink this. It's him. I don't want to hear about South Carolina. I don't want to hear about Utah State. Dan Hurley won a national championship, kept his team on top, and has the best team in the country heading into this game, UConn versus St. John's. The theme on this show, since we started it just a week and a half ago, is Dan Hurley and his messages. How does he get his message across to his team? This is another message game. You could probably say that about everyone, but in particular, if you think this is just about securing a spot in the Big East final, I think you'd be wrong. That'll be a result. Let me take you back. Naheim Alleyne, great guard off the bench in the 2023 national championship team. transferred to St. John's. Not really playing much for Pitino after being sold really an expanded role on St. John's. And I know Dan Hurley. I don't know him personally, but I know Dan Hurley has to not be happy about that. Not that Naheim Alleyne is not thriving, because I think he is really irked that Pitino got his hooks into him, that he was able to get some type of message to Naheim and his team and really kind of sold him a bill of goods, in my opinion. But lo and behold, over the last 6 games, by the way, a 6-game Johnny's win streak, Alleyne's role has been up. His minutes have been up. Let's just take a look at them. 21 minutes against St. We'll go backwards from Seton Hall game yesterday. Played 21 minutes, had 14 points, was 3 for 3 from deep. Game before that, now it's against Georgetown, but still 18 minutes off the bench, 8 points, did not miss a shot, was 2 for 2 from 3. Again, against a mediocre opponent, DePaul, 11 points, was 1 for 2 from 3. And the theme is 20 minutes against Xavier, didn't score a bunch, 14 against Creighton, 14 against Georgetown. So his minutes have gone up. His contribution has been there. And Alleyne's contribution to UConn was evident. And now it looks like Pitino is utilizing his talents as well. The last 3 games, he's only missed 1 shot from 3. Not bad to have a guy come off the bench and go 6 for 7 and 3 wins. So this game scares me a bit. Just a little bit. In the end, I think we keep things close, and I think they keep things close, and we kind of have that slow march to a UConn 12-point win. But don't you think for 1 second that Dan Hurley has forgotten Rick Pitino got his dirty little hands into Dan's cookie jar and got into his player's ear, promising those moon and the stars? I think the Huskies learn from their slow start and really utilize post presence. I think that starts with Donovan Clingan, even posting a little bit with Castle, putting the 2 of them in pick and roll with shooters spread. If St. John's starts to help to start the game, then we kick out. But I don't expect UConn to come out firing up threes. I think that was a little excessive in the start of the Xavier game. But I did like what Tristan said at halftime to Christina Pink of Fox Sports or FS1. He said, we've worked too hard to not stop shooting. So maybe I'm a little off base there. I think I do feel as if the fan base, sometimes myself, really any fan base, is like, why are they shooting so many threes? It's just part of the game now. And this team has earned that. And I think but I also do think they play inside out. I think it comes down to Dan really kind of reining them in a little bit and focusing on what is about building a lead and then kind of using the 3-pointer to augment. So I don't think that they're going to shy away from shooting threes. That's a part of their game. But I do think working their positional plays and making sure that they are in the right spots will lead to some really good opportunities for them. Backdoor cuts, as we know, those are actually set plays. Those aren't, as Donnie Marshall calls, just players doing what they do. We should have a whole episode talking about how Donnie Marshall gives UConn no credit, but we'll get to that another time. I think tonight's going to be electric, and I think UConn will end up pulling away mid second half. But I think it'll be a pretty. I think St. John's will be in contact, so to speak, right? So they'll hang around at that 6-7 point. And if it's the other way, if St. John's controls the game, I still think UConn will end up pulling away. But I think truly UConn will control the heart of this game and then pull out late. So let's look at the star players on both sides and how they match up and how that'll affect the outcome after this. Do you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to the IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing only. All right. Fire Stick and Fire TV overlay. Fire Stick was my first intro into streaming, and now Fire TV is now your destination for sports, for live games, to highlights, to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experience with smart TVs as well as the Fire Stick that can plug you into any existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos for your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us on Locked On and most of the big pro leagues, college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in world of sports, March Madness, and the NBA. All right, let's talk about the matchups for tonight. We'll go top down, so to speak, right? So the bigs, Joel Soriano versus Donovan Clingan. I think Soriano is a load. You know, they have him listed at 6'11", 255 pounds, but my guy is probably closer to 275, 280. I think he's been eating some arroz con pollo on the regular basis, and he's just a big dude, man. I think Clingan neutralizes his presence. But if Sampson has to guard him, you know, it's going to be a little different than the energy that he injected against Xavier yesterday. He's given up 40 to 50 pounds on Joel, and he can get bullied. And it's not because he's weak or he's not up for the challenge, but that's just a weight class thing. You know, Clingan staying out of foul trouble is going to directly affect Soriano's effectiveness on offense. And maybe some of the calls to getting, you know, Donovan the ball, like I did when we blew out Seton Hall at home, maybe that gets Joel in some foul trouble, and it can be, in fact, impactful in its own rights just off of that. You know, you can get some cheap fouls just based off of, you know, banging down low and, you know, allowing Donovan to, you know, get himself going. I felt like he was a little out of whack in the first game. Looked off balance, looked tired. I think sometimes when a big doesn't get off to a great start, they can look slow when Donovan isn't. He's just a big dude, and it takes him a while to get going. So I think feeding him early is a big thing for UConn, and it should be a part of how they develop their identity. And I thought that's where we were going. Yesterday kind of was a different story. They got to him later in the game. He was very impactful in the second half. But I also think it gives bigs more incentive to run the floor, knowing they're going to get the ball. They play harder on defense. It's just all innate. It's not that Donovan doesn't want to help his team. It's just you just have a better idea of what you want to do, and it just I think it just keeps you engaged in the game a little longer. To go into that, I think UConn has the advantage there. But I also think the advantage is fleeting if Donovan picks up 2 fouls in the first half, which has happened in the past. If that happens, everything I said in the first segment goes out the window. But those self-inflicted wounds are something that UConn may have to deal with down the stretch here as now we get into these tournament games. To go to the wings, you know, I think Chris Ledlum from St. John's, the Harvard transfer, he was an 18-point scorer last year. So he's capable in spots. And I think he's got also another kind of wide body guy. I think he's a matchup nightmare for Caravan if he can post. I think a guy like Castle is giving up weight, but he would also probably match up better to kind of take him away if that kind of is an issue. I think Karaban is probably 2 or 3 inches taller than him. But just as far as, being able to body him down low, I think that's a tough one. But conversely, I think Karaban's ability to hit deep threes kind of pulls Ledlum away from rebounding and doesn't give St. John's any opportunities to get any second chance points. So I think that's kind of a wash. And I think Alex is playing well enough where I think that advantage goes to UConn. And then I would go into, the biggest thing is guard play, and then we'll get into the bench. Obviously, the advantage in guard play goes to UConn. You have Cam and Tristan, both first team, all Big East, more consistent and durable throughout the year. But when you look at Jenkins and Dingle, they are more than capable of going tit for tat with our guys. I think if this is a close game, the X factor could be bench play. Can they get 14 points from Naheim Alleyne? Can they get 18 points from RJ Luis like they did against Seton Hall? I mean, it's March. Anything is possible. But the reality is St. John's is going up against the number 2 defense in the country, according to Ken Pom, versus the 61st ranked in Seton Hall. Now, that's like going out in boxing and beating Jake Paul and then thinking you're a big deal. And then the next fight you have Canelo. There are levels to this. UConn is going to be well aware of their former teammate. They're going to be, I actually think RJ Luis is more of a nightmare for them, just from his ability to kind of get out in the transition game. I think he's a little more, he's twitchier than Naheim. He's a better athlete. I think Naheim is a better shooter, obviously. He's very streaky, but RJ Luis is the type of guy that can create great matchup nightmares, create good on-ball defense. So those two guys coming off the bench for 32 points against Seton Hall, that's huge for St. John's. Don't see it happening against UConn, but something to look over. So really, in review, I think the bigs, Klingon is 100% head and shoulders above us Soriano, but Soriano is definitely a matchup nightmare for Sampson. Imperative for DC to stay out of foul trouble. Karaban start edge over Ledlum, and a big edge over Glenn Taylor, someone we didn't even talk about. On the guards, starters and bench, UConn slight edge, but I would be shocked if Jenkins and Dingle didn't ball out an MSG. Chance to knock out UConn, chance to get to the finals. I just don't think it'll be enough. St. John's has the edge on bench, but having the 6th man of the year is always comforting. I expect Haas to be, in the mix to shut down Naheim and RJ Luis when he's given those assignments. The other thing is get some X factors. I think Solo Ball came into the game and kind of reminded Dan Hurley that he's a pretty good player in a pinch. So if any of our guards get in foul trouble, if we needed someone to spark the offense a little bit, Solo is more than capable. Jalen Stewart has been getting some good minutes. More. I mean, how incredible was that block? God, the game is escaping me. But he's so close to being an impactful player for UConn, and I think we won't see it until next year. But you never know. We've had freshmen that have had breakout performances coming out of nowhere. Ricky Moore comes to mind. In the Big East tournament final, 1996, was more of a defensive specialist and had like 10 points in a matter of minutes when Ray Allen was really struggling against Georgetown and Allen Iverson. So you never know. Jalen Stewart could, give you a 10 or 12 point performance and really kind of spread his wings for us. So, but going forward, I think we don't really have, St. John's doesn't really have an edge over one player. Like if you went down the list of when we play other teams, there might be one matchup like against, even though I can't stand their fan base, Providence, right? With Carter, if he's playing well, he has an edge over whoever's guarding him. And St. John's really just doesn't have that. I think Jenkins has a little more quickness and is a tough guard for either Cam or for Tristan, but I think their height affects his ability to pull up. Dingle as well. So I think for me, I'm still sticking with UConn by 12, which I think would cover the spread if I'm guessing right. I think I saw like 10 or 12, so somewhere in that range. So it's close. I mean, if you're a betting man or a betting gal, I would lay the points because I think UConn's in a nice rhythm right now, but it's also going to be a really emotional game. So wouldn't surprise me if it dipped under 12, but that's my goal, and I'm sticking to it. Mark your calendars for Locked On College Basketball Breakdown show. It's Monday, March 18th, 7 a.m. Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on the Locked On Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcast. I think that'll be a fantastic show. I like Andy and Isaac. I think they do a good job with Locked On College Basketball. So yeah, if you're looking for some sleeper picks, some really good insight into how to fill out a bracket, please check that out on Monday, 7 a.m. Next, we're going to bring in Kyle Bergstrom from our Locked On UConn Correspondent Network to get the atmosphere on MSG for the quarterfinal round coming up right after this. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new Nissan 2024 SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The Houston Cougars can only be described as an armada. The teams, this top-seeded team is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they're expected to land a top seed in the tournament after their first season in the Big 12. The Tennessee Vols can be described as a pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. Player of the Year candidate Dalton Knecht has carried the Vols all season and made them a team to watch in March. The Utah State Aggies are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team obviously surprised us all with powerful performance against New Mexico, giving them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. They'll say win for life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Aggies have done. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, and Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And I thought of this. If Nissan marketed wagons, UConn would get a branded spot. Maybe that's a question I'll ask. I'll put it in the comments. If Nissan had a wagon and it was named after UConn, what would the name be? There was a wagon concept in Canada called the Stagia. Let's have some fun with it. Nissan, a great sponsor for Locked On. Give me a name of a wagon for Nissan that describes UConn. This next episode, next segment, we're bringing in Kyle Bergstrom. He went to the first game. I'm going to give you some idea of the atmosphere at MSG and everything that goes with it. I'm going to bring him in here in about 2 seconds. I want to get him all squared away here, and we'll bring Kyle to the stage. No, we're not bringing Kyle in. I'm going to bring him in. We can hear him backstage. Hold, please. And here he is, Kyle Bergstrom, our Locked On UConn correspondent. What's up, man? How was the game?
How you doing? Game was great.
Great.
Yesterday down in New York City, first of all, it was a beautiful day in New York City. It was like 70 and sunny the whole time. So we got out of Grand Central, walked over to hit Legends First, actually, which is a UConn spot in Manhattan. And then we went to Madison Square Garden. Walking in there is just like surreal. It was my first time being in the Garden too.
Wow.
Like walking in down, like we had really good seats. So we were in section 1. So like walking down there and just like seeing like everybody else, like the whole stadium starting to fill in, like players on the court, everything that like goes into a stadium like that, it was mind blowing.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Tell me about the experience riding the trade in. I messaged with you earlier, and you were talking about how it was pretty packed with UConn fans. Tell me about that.
Yep. So we, me and 2 of my buddies from UConn, we actually took the train out of Stanford. We were waiting in line, like train is just about to get there, and like you just saw like a flock of UConn fans just get on the train. And you knew where everyone was going to, so it was fun.
No, it's awesome. Anybody crazy on the train that any story you can tell? Like just I think I didn't the train make an announcement that they ran out of drinks on the train cart?
I heard that story. I think it was a different line than I was on. I must have went earlier in the day, but yeah, other than that, no, it was kind of a calm train ride actually.
Everyone's getting relaxed, getting ready for the game. Do you think that? I mean, think about this because it's a noon game. Did you think the crowd was quiet in the first.
I
know.
did.
That.
So
Okay.
I was expecting a little bit more, especially with the whole like UConn playing at like. Well, I get it. It's a noon game on Thursday. It was a little underwhelming in there. It was kind of quiet in there. But as you said, it was a noon start. But I like watching the other games later in the day. Like you could see how the crowd ramped up, and I'm sure that's how it'll be today for UConn St. John's. So.
Yeah. Do you know anybody that's going to the game tonight, or as I know you
do. I have a couple of my buddies. His name is Kyle as well. He was in a couple of the videos I sent you. He's going on tonight. He'll be in the student section. So, yep.
Well, shout out Kyle. Definitely looking forward to it. What do you expect from tonight's game? Outside of the atmosphere being different, do you see anything? I profiled a little earlier in the show that will be out later this afternoon before the game. Where we have matchups that we can exploit, but also the Hurley versus Pitino angle. Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to tonight?
Well, I'm just looking forward. Hopefully they play a better first half than they did last night. Started off a little slow, so hopefully we can come out of the gates a little stronger. And obviously I'm looking forward to the coaching matchup. Hurley and Pitino, two animated guys, two fiery guys who love to win. So it's going to be exciting.
Do you think and feel free to disagree with me, but I don't think this is up for debate, but you can prove me wrong here if possible. I think Hurley is salty about Pitino taking Naheim Alleyne from that championship team and kind of selling him a bill of goods on an expanded role, which is kind of coming to fruition now. Like this podcast, we talked about how he's getting about 14 to 20 minutes a game over the last like 6 to 7 games. So, but do you think that that's still, stuck in his craw?
I do, 100%. I feel bad for Naheim, first of all, because I know Rick Pitino, the used car salesman, came in and promised him all this stuff, and it just didn't happen for like most of the season. Like I was watching these St. John's games, I'm like, where's Naheim Alleyne, man? He's a good player. He helped us win that championship. We wouldn't have won it without him. So,
yeah, over his last 3 games, he's only missed 1 shot.
Really?
So he's coming in hot. He was 3 for 3 against Seton Hall. He had 14 points he was 3 for 3 from 3. So I do think that we have not his kryptonite, if you will. I think Haas, if they're in at the same time, shuts him down, kind of puts him in a in a locker and kind of puts him away. And I like Naheim. I think he was a good player at Virginia Tech. He was a good player for us. Helped us win a championship. I mean, anytime you can bring a guy off the bench that has no fear and pulls the trigger and is streaky. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Last comment from you. Is there anyone or anything that you're looking forward to? If we win tonight, who do you want to play?
I want to play Marquette.
Okay. Why?
Because better competition. It would look better on UConn if we won that game. And if we lost that game, it wouldn't look as bad. Because it's higher competition, so
Sure.
I would rather
I
play
understand
that.
But at this point, though, Kyle, like it's just like the NCAA tournament. Whoever's in front of you,
yeah, you're
doesn't
right.
matter. Resumes don't matter anymore. We're going to be a 1 seed, whether we're the 1 overall or the second team in or whatever you want to call it. If remember that the argument all of this year has been like, well, UConn got lucky because they played a bunch of like mid majors last year in the tournament. It's like, well, if Kansas didn't lose, if I forget Texas didn't lose, like those are things that are out of our control. I do think Providence is going to give Marquette a hell of a run.
I think it's going to be a great game tonight.
I actually wouldn't mind seeing you want to know why I want Providence to win, because I was rooting for Villanova last night because I wanted 4 original Big East teams to be in the semifinal. I think it would have made the crowd a little more Northeast Central, right? And look, if it's UConn versus Providence at Madison Square Garden, I mean, come on, that's
It'd be electric.
I mean, Marquette is more of like a national name. If UConn Marquette would be, then like Fox would probably like that better. But as far as like where we're from, come on, man, that's the ticket. That's the game. Well, listen, stay on while we kind of promo Locked On National Sports, but I appreciate you coming on. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league, Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the Free Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Kyle Bergstrom, our student correspondent, I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, wishing you peace, love, and go Huskies.
Go Huskies.
Whoops.
There it goes.